I'm John Fensel, and we're here continuing our discussion in Gettysburg on McPherson's Ridge west and just slightly north of town. On the morning of July 1st, the first day of the battle, Confederate Major General Harry Heath had every reason to be confident. Now, the thing to remember here is that Heath was a brand new division commander who was only recently promoted to the rank of Major General. Heath ordered Archer's and Joe Davis's brigades into the line of battle along Hare Ridge to clear McPherson's Ridge and open the road into Gettysburg. So just a little bit about these Confederate generals who were rapidly closing in on Gettysburg: Harry Heath, James Archer, and Joe Davis. Henry Heath preferred to go by Harry. After the war began at Fort Sumter, Heath resigned from the U.S. Army and joined the Confederate States Army, where he was promoted to lieutenant colonel. He was born in Virginia's Tidewater region, and he was unpopular with the mountain farmers and was known as a very strict disciplinarian. He was brought up by Robert E. Lee while Heath was serving briefly as his quartermaster, and he had a very close relationship with Lee. Heath was one of the few generals who Lee called by his first name. Heath was given a brigade in the 3rd Corps of the Army of Northern Virginia, commanded by A.P. Hill, whose division he commanded when he was wounded at Chancellorsville. James Archer was born in Northern Maryland in a wealthy military family. He graduated from Princeton University in 1835, and then he went to law school in Kentucky. In 1847, during the Mexican-American War, he was commissioned as a captain and fought in many battles. After Mexico, Archer moved to Texas in 1848, and he was wounded there in a duel. Interestingly, even had a second duel with Thomas J. Jackson, eventually to be known as Stonewall Jackson. He returned to Maryland and he resumed his law practice, but decided in 1855 to join the regular army as a captain in the 9th U.S. Infantry in the Pacific Northwest. When the Civil War began in 1861, Archer was stationed all the way at Fort Walla Walla in the Washington Territory. He resigned his commission on May 14th. He traveled to the South and he joined the Confederate Army as a captain in the Provisional Army. He soon was named a colonel of the 5th Texas Infantry Regiment, and his men dubbed him the Little Gamecock for his slight build but fierce approach to combat. Joseph Robert Davis was born in Woodville, Mississippi on January 12, 1825, and was educated in Nashville and in Ohio. He was a Mississippi lawyer and eventually was elected to the Mississippi State Senate before the war broke out. But once it did, Joe Davis entered as a captain of the Confederate militia from Madison County, Mississippi, even though he didn't have any military training. Despite his lack of experience, he was pretty quickly promoted to lieutenant colonel of the 10th Regiment, Mississippi Volunteers, and then he served on the military staff of his uncle, who happened to be President Jefferson Davis. He became an aide-de-camp with the rank of Colonel of Cavalry. Almost a year before the Battle of Gettysburg, he was commissioned a brigadier general, and after all the charges of nepotism were cleared up, he was given command of a brigade in Heath's division, and he did lead that brigade through some of the most bitter fighting of the war. Now, back here on this developing battlefield, it's important to know that Robert E. Lee had ordered A.P. Hill to avoid a general engagement with the enemy before he could assemble his full army. But with Heath's actions, his order was really rendered effectively moot. James Archer's brigade was advancing right here through these woods up to McPherson's Ridge, trading shots with dismounted cavalry. But right about now, Archer started sensing something was desperately wrong, because in the distance he saw troops in motion that he didn't think were cavalry at all. And yet, when he expressed his concern, Heath waved away Archer's concerns and ordered him to get his brigade moving, all in order to get an idea of the strength and the position of the enemy. As Archer's rebels moved forward 100 and then 200 yards, the firing in the brigade's front suddenly exploded. Archer's 2 left regiments, the 7th and the 14th Tennessee, hit the Wisconsin regiment, the Iron Brigade, full force, causing them to shift to the left. But then a new avalanche of Iron Brigade soldiers rolled down this ravine onto them with fixed bayonets. The 7th Wisconsin followed the 19th Indiana and then the 24th Michigan. Archer's troops exclaimed, "That comes those old black hats. It's the Army of the Potomac, sure, and we are deceived. 'Tis the Army of the Potomac." There are those damn black-hatted fellows again. Tain't no militia, it's the Army of the Potomac. General George Gordon Meade had ordered scouting of positions at Pipe Creek as a battleground, but by noon on July 1st, that plan was dead. Captain Stephen Weld came with the alarming news from John Reynolds that he had taken the 1st Corps into a stand-up fight at Gettysburg. Meade's first inclination was to treat Reynolds' move as a covering action for the Pipe Creek withdrawal. Then he received the message that Reynolds was killed this morning. And it was just around that time that another messenger arrived, dispatched by Brigadier General John Buford. "We need help now," Buford pleaded. This was not the battle that Meade wanted, nor was it in the place that he had wanted, but it was the battle he now had to fight. How often do we find ourselves in that same exact position? By about 10:45 in the morning, firing died down along McPherson's Ridge. Wadsworth's division was battered but still holding in the wheat fields. Abner Doubleday had achieved his corps command, but not the way that he had wanted it, because it was through Reynolds' death. So at this point in the battle, now in command, Doubleday interpreted his mission to be to hold on to the position until ordered to leave it. Doubleday positioned 3 of his Pennsylvania regiments on the right of the Iron Brigade so that they could occupy the McPherson House and Barn and McPherson's Ridge. That brigade commander, Roy Stone, was only 26 years old. Buford ordered a hasty barricade of fence rails and field stones on the seminary's west side. Doubleday fully expected that Meade, as he later said, would ride to the front to see for himself what was going on and issue definitive orders of some kind. But just before 11 o'clock in the morning, it wasn't Meade who showed up, but Oliver Otis Howard. The Iron Brigade had the momentum. Nobody had told Generals Davis or Archer to expect Union infantry here on McPherson's Ridge. The rebels moved back toward Hare Ridge on a full retreat. Ultimately, Archer was captured just on the other side of these woods. By 12 p.m., things were no easier for the other part of Harry Heath's division that was positioned on the north side of Cashtown Pike. Heath had suffered a really humiliating repulse by Federal infantry. Remember, the Union infantry that shouldn't have been there. Whether it was inexperience or hubris, whatever it was, now Harry Heath had a real mess on his hands. Of 1863, the Western Maryland Railroad connected Gettysburg to the east, and an unfinished extension paralleled Chambersburg Pike right here, which is now US 30 here on the west side of town. Although the rails hadn't yet been laid, the roadbed was finished, and it included a series of 3 cuts right through the series of north-south ridges: Seminary Ridge, McPherson's Ridge, and Hare Ridge. On the afternoon of July 1st, these cuts served as cover or protection to Confederate units advancing on the field, but ultimately they became a fatal trap when Union troops attacked this cut. Troops from Confederate Brigadier General Joseph R. Davis's brigade, the 2nd Mississippi, the 42nd Mississippi, and the 55th North Carolina took shelter in the middle cut as the Union 6th Wisconsin, joined by the 84th and the 95th New York, attacked from the south. The 6th, Lieutenant Colonel Rufus Dawes, reported that around 160 out of the 450 men of his regiment fell in the charge. When they reached the cut, Confederate troops found it almost impossible to return fire due to the steep slopes of the embankment. As a result, many Confederates were killed and over 200 were captured. The railroad was completed after the war and still is in daily use today.
Gettysburg.